April 1944, Berlin was still standing, but its skies were no longer German. Inside the German Air Ministry, a man stood holding a report that confirmed what he already feared. The numbers on the paper were brutal. Between January and April of that year, the Luftwaffe's daytime fighter force had lost more than 1,000 pilots killed. Not wounded. Not captured. Dead. These were not inexperienced flyers. They were squadron leaders, group commanders, wing commanders, men with 50, 60, even 70 confirmed aerial victories. Veterans who had survived the early years of the war and carried the hard-earned knowledge of air combat in their instincts. And now they were gone. The man holding the report was Adolf Galland, a general who understood numbers better than most men around him. He knew that no amount of speeches or medals could argue with mathematics. Germany was running out of pilots faster than it could ever replace them. And once pilots were gone, aircraft meant nothing. Galland was no ordinary general. At just 32 years old, he held the rank of General der Jägerflieger, commander of all German fighter forces. He was the youngest general officer in the German military. He had scored 104 aerial victories, all against Western Allied aircraft. Around his neck hung the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds and honor awarded to only 27 men in German history. He was instantly recognizable. Slicked back black hair, a thin mustache, a cigar almost permanently clenched between his teeth even during combat flights. His aircraft carried a Mickey Mouse emblem, mocking, confident, unforgettable. Galland had helped create the image of the fearless German fighter ace. But unlike the myth, he was not blind to reality. While other generals stayed behind desks, Galland kept flying. Despite direct orders from high command forbidding him to engage in combat, he secretly continued to take unauthorized missions. He believed a commander who did not see the battlefield could not understand it. And by early 1944, what he was seeing in the skies frightened him. That spring, Galland climbed into the cockpit of a Focke-Wulf 190 and took off to intercept an incoming American bomber formation near Magdeburg. Soon he spotted them rows of B-17 flying fortresses. Massive four-engine bombers flying in tight formations. Their defensive guns pointing in every direction, Galland attacked almost instantly. 4 P-51 Mustangs dropped in behind him. Galland knew the truth of that moment. Fighting 4 Mustangs alone was suicide. The P-51 was faster, agile, and flown by pilots trained not for glory, but for efficiency. Their mission was simple: destroy German fighters. Before they reached the bombers, Galland did the only thing that offered a chance of survival. He dove straight down, the Mustangs followed, tracer rounds streaked past him, close enough that he could see individual bullets burn through the air. The most decorated living ace of Germany, commander of an entire Air Force, was running for his life from 4 American pilots, whose names history would never record. He survived using a desperate trick. While diving, he fired his own guns, creating smoke streams that looked like rear-facing fire. The American pilots, trained not to take unnecessary risks, broke off. Galland escaped, but as he flew home, his hands shaking on the controls, the truth settled in. The Americans had not hesitated. They were not intimidated. They had used numbers, discipline, and aggression. 4 against 1. And nearly enough. This, Galland realized, was the new air war, and it was only getting worse. For Galland, the turning point had a name and a date. Late February 1944, the Americans called it Operation Argument. History would remember it as Big Week for 6 days. From February 20th to February 25th, more than 3,000 American bombers, escorted by over 1,000 fighters, attacked the heart of German aircraft production. Messerschmitt factories, Focke-Wulf assembly plants, ball-bearing production centers, engine facilities. Everything the Luftwaffe depended on. The bomber streams stretched for miles across the sky. Their contrails carved white scars through German airspace. Day after day they came. The Luftwaffe had no choice but to fight. Single-engine fighters tore into bomber formations. Twin-engine destroyers fired rockets into dense clusters of aircraft. The sky became a slaughterhouse. In just 6 days, Germany lost around 350 fighter aircraft, nearly a third of its available fighters, but aircraft were not the real disaster. In those same 6 days, the Luftwaffe lost 17% of its fighter pilots. Galland understood what that meant instantly. A shot-down aircraft could be replaced in weeks. A trained pilot could not. The experience lost in a single week would take years to rebuild if it could be rebuilt at all. And the losses didn't stop when Big Week ended. March was worse. April was worse still. The Americans had changed the rules of the war before 1944. American escort fighters stayed close to the bomber formations. Their job was defensive, protect the bombers, engage only when necessary. But now that restraint was gone under General Jimmy Doolittle. American fighters were unleashed. They hunted German pilots before they reached the bombers. They chased retreating aircraft back to their airfields. They attacked planes on takeoff and landing. They strafed runways, hangars, fuel trucks. And the aircraft that made this possible was the P-51 Mustang. With its long range drop tanks and powerful Merlin engine, the Mustang could fly from England to Berlin and back. It could fight anything the Germans had and usually win. Galland later wrote that nowhere was safe. Not during takeoff, not during climb, not during combat, not on the way home. Not even after landing. American fighters outnumbered German defenders 6-1, sometimes 8-1. And worse, their pilots were exceptionally well trained, which led Galland to the most painful realization of all. The problem was not bravery. It was training. In 1944, the United States trained 29,000 military pilots. Each one received nearly 200 hours of flight time before seeing combat. They practiced instrument flying, formation tactics, gunnery, navigation, and aerial combat. They trained in simulators. They had fuel. They had aircraft. They had time. When an American pilot arrived in Europe, he was prepared. Germany had none of this. Fuel shortages slashed training hours. Aircraft shortages limited flight time. Instructor shortages destroyed quality. Some pilots arriving at frontline units had less than 80 hours total flight time. Some had never fired their guns at a moving aircraft. Galland watched them arrive 18, 19, 20 years old, confident, idealistic, convinced they would become aces. Most were dead within 30 days. Veterans knew how to survive early missions. Inexperienced pilots died before learning anything. Galland called them cannon fodder, not out of cruelty, but because the numbers left no other description. Meanwhile, American industry moved like an unstoppable machine. At Willow Run, Ford produced a completed B-24 bomber every single hour. One heavy bomber, fully equipped, day and night. When one was destroyed, another already existed. When a crew died, another crew was training. The system never paused. The Luftwaffe could not compete. Galland reported that each major American raid cost Germany 50 pilots. Sometimes there were multiple raids per week. The losses were unsustainable. Factories still produced fighters, but fuel vanished. Spare parts disappeared. Infrastructure collapsed. Pilots died faster than replacements arrived. In April 1944, Galland delivered his conclusion to high command. The fighter force was nearing collapse. He proposed one last gamble, the big blow. A massive reserve of 2,000 fighters, held back and unleashed in one overwhelming strike. Destroy hundreds of bombers in a single day. Force the Americans to pause. The plan was reviewed and ignored. Resources were diverted. Priorities shifted. Hermann Göring blamed pilots instead of fixing the system. Galland kept flying. Watching the end approach. By June 1944, during D-Day, the Luftwaffe was nearly absent. German pilots who rose were instantly swarmed. The Allies flew 14,000 sorties that day. Germany flew around 300. The skies were lost forever. Galland survived the war. He later commanded elite jet fighters and continued flying until he was wounded in 1945. After the war, he wrote his memoirs. The first and the last. His conclusion never changed. Wars are not won by heroes. They are won by factories. Training systems, fuel, and mathematics. And mathematics never negotiates.